Thank you, Congressman Kucinich, for being a brave person to ask all of us to come and talk about what we want our Congress to talk about. In fact, how many of you all are Congress people out there sitting in the audience? Oh my goodness, how many of you all are staffers of Congress people out there? Oh my goodness, how many of you all are good, fine people of this country and other countries that are worried about wars the United States is prosecuting? I'm Ann Wright. I'm a retired U.S. Army colonel with 29 years in the U.S. military. I was a U.S. diplomat and resigned 7 years ago in opposition to the war in Iraq. 7 years. 7 years we've been in Iraq. 9 years we've been in Afghanistan. What in the world are we doing? You know, so the last 7 years since I resigned, I've been speaking out as much as I can, using my expertise as a military officer and as a foreign service officer to say what the primrose path the Bush administration led our country down. And now, 7 years into it, another administration is on us with the same path. The same path. It is amazing to be here right now in this, because I saw a police officer coming through the door just a minute ago, and sitting up on this side of the table was really interesting, you know, because usually they're coming after us in the audience, and that's usually where I am. So it's a real honor to be on this side of the table where maybe I'll have a little protection against what? Protection against trying to hold our Congress and our executive department accountable for wars, or blowing our budget, or having things that are going on in our country that we cannot fix because we don't have any money left for it, because it's all gone. It's gone to these wars. It's gone to that Afghanistan where I was in December of 2001. I was on the small team that helped open that embassy in 2001. I went there, I volunteered. I was thinking, you know, okay, Al-Qaeda, yeah, they were headquartered there, you know, let's go after them there. Well, 7 years later, I'm not of that opinion. I mean, if you look at what military operations have done for Al-Qaeda, I mean, there have been many more Al-Qaeda wrapped up all over the world in non-military operations, in professional law enforcement operations, where people have been found, they've been captured, they've been put in front of a court of law, and they've been, some have been convicted, some haven't been convicted. But what's happened to Afghanistan? Here we are 9 years into that now, and we have a U.S.-sponsored assassination program with drones that are killing Afghans, Pakistanis, that are killing Americans. And now we have an administration, whoever would have thought, that it would be the Obama administration that now authorized the assassination of American citizens.
That's right. That's right.
What is happening here? What is happening here? Iraq, that's why I resigned. One could say, well, you should have resigned earlier. Why didn't you resign over Afghanistan? Well, it took me a while. Iraq, here we are 7 years into that. 7 years. 4,396 U.S. military killed, some 400 coalition forces. How many Iraqis have been killed? Hundreds of thousands. Millions have been displaced. How many Afghans have been killed in our 9 years there? What are we doing there? Actually, that's not what I'm going to talk about. Because last year, I was focused not only on wars of Iraq and Afghanistan, but on other things, actually, that I had put in my letter of resignation back in March of 2003. Not only did I resign over the Iraq War, which I talked about in my resignation letter, but I also talked about another area of great concern for me as a diplomat, and that was the never-ending, unbalanced policies of all U.S. administrations on the issues of Israel and Palestine. Congress, because it is virtually never talked about here. Never talked about in this Congress. It was talked about when a Goldstone report was debated in the Capitol, where the report of a UN human rights person, a judge, a South African judge, a member of the Jewish faith, who had been on human rights teams throughout the world, I did a long report, 578 pages I believe it was, concerning the 23-day attack of the Israeli military on Gaza back in December of 2008 and December of 2009. That attack that caused 1,440 deaths of Palestinians in Gaza, that caused over 5,000 people to be wounded, that caused over 50,000 people to be left homeless, that caused virtually all of the civil infrastructure of that country, the sewage, the water, schools, hospitals, to be, if not destroyed, severely damaged. That was following a 3-year siege that had been going on Gaza. A 3-year siege that the United States is a participant of. Israel and Egypt are the two main implementers of the siege, but the United States is a part of it, as are countries of the European Union. A siege that is strangling the 1.5 million people that live in Gaza. 1.5 million people in a small little place, a little land, 25 miles long, 5 miles wide, one of the most densely populated places in the whole world. And yet there's a siege on it. It's being strangled. Food can't get in. Merchandise, materials, reconstruction materials for the damage that was done over a year and 4 months ago cannot get in because only 44 items are allowed in by the Israelis and by the U.S. and by the Egyptians. How do the people of Gaza survive? It's through a tunnel system. Hundreds of tunnels dug under the border with Egypt. 500 tunnels operating at any one time. Tunnels where just yesterday, the Egyptian government put gas into the tunnels, killing 4 of the tunnel workers, severely injuring 6 of them. Gaza, a place on the border of Gaza, now the Israeli military is pushing into Gaza land to create a buffer zone for Israeli military. 300 meters, that's nearly 1,000 feet going deep into Gaza. And just over the last month, young men and women, Palestinians living in Gaza, have said, that's wrong. You cannot take more of our land. You cannot continue to take our land. And they have pushed back on it, and they have gone to those buffer zones. And now they're being killed in the buffer zones. Yesterday, a young man was killed, shot, hit in his leg, a femoral artery burst. He died in Al-Shifa Hospital. 4 days ago, 4 young people were injured. 3 young people were injured in the border zone. 2 Palestinians. 1 woman from Malta, who we know. I've been now in Gaza 3 times with Code Pink Women for Peace, organizing over 250 people. In May, a young woman from Malta, 28 years old, Bianca Zamet, came with us because she wanted to get into Gaza to be a part of what's called the International Solidarity Movement. Men and women of internationals who come to Israel, come into Gaza and the occupied territories to be an international presence, to witness what's happening, and hopefully to be a person that maybe the Israelis aren't going to shoot. We know they shoot Palestinian farmers and shepherds that are in the areas around the border. These international men and women go in to say, maybe we can prevent them, but they don't. These people are getting shot, including Bianca Zamet, that was killed, that was wounded in her leg 4 days ago. Another American that you know very well, you've heard the name of Rachel Corrie, a young woman that was killed 7 years ago in April of 2003, who was trying to protect a house in Rafah, Gaza, from being demolished by an Israeli bulldozer. You know, the Israelis say, well, we've got to take action because there are rockets that are coming from Gaza into our territory. And I deplore that. I wish groups in Gaza would not fire those rockets because you know what the response is going to be. You know it's going to be brutal. On the other hand, you can kind of understand the pressure of people saying, how can the world sit by and let this happen to us? We've got to somehow show that we're alive, that we have a right to defend ourselves. What can we do here in this country? Well, we've taken people to Gaza. We took 1,340 people to Cairo, Egypt in December as a part of the Gaza Freedom March. We got that far, and then the Egyptian government said, no, you can't go any further. You can't take these people in because they were building an underground wall with technology from the United States of America. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers putting the plans in for a wall that now is 4 miles complete. It has 4 more miles to go along that Philadelphia corridor where all of these tunnels are being, that bring in supplies, food into Gaza. The Egyptians said, no, you can't go in. 100 of us were able to get in finally and march in solidarity with the people of Gaza. The statistics are pretty remarkable when you look at what has happened in Gaza and in the occupied territories. You know, the occupied territories where that area around the West Bank has been chipped away and chipped away and chipped away by illegal settlements. Illegal settlements that every day are coming out. East Jerusalem, now more and more settlements. More Palestinian lands taken by Israeli, Jewish-only superhighways that connect pods of settlements. Apartheid walls that are built on Palestinian land that stop movements of people from their homes to schools, from homes to their work, from homes to their agricultural lands. The statistics are remarkable on the violence that the United States is a part of, the violence that our U.S. military equipment is used in, F-16s that are used to kill Palestinians, Apache helicopters, dime bombs, Dinsener metal explosive bombs that have tungsten in them that when it's spewed out will kill everyone in this room but won't kill people in the next room. White phosphorus that burns through people's arms and down into their bones. American bombs that we give as a part of a military assistance package and that $3 billion a year that we give to Israel and we give to Egypt. We are a part of this. 4,791 Palestinians have been killed in the 8 years leading up to December 2008. In the same period, 245 Israeli forces were killed and 237 Israeli civilians. It's a very disproportionate figure. It's a disproportionate use of force that the Israeli military is able to use, and it's because of the United States. We give them that money. I want to just kind of end on one of the premises that we have here is what Congress must do to end U.S. wars and help secure a peaceful Middle East. I mean, that's the title of her teach-in. Well, I have just a couple of suggestions. Number one, on the Israeli-Palestinian issues, I think we need to send congressional delegations to Gaza to see the effects of the collective and the disproportionate use of force by the Israeli military. Right now, to my knowledge, there are 8 members of Congress that have been, 1 senator and 7 members of the House of Representatives, and that's it. And yet, hundreds of U.S. congressmen go to Israel every single year. Number 2, send congressional delegations to observe the effects of the illegal settlements in East Jerusalem and the West Bank, the apartheid walls and the Jewish-only superhighways. Number 3, withhold all U.S. government funding until Israel ends the siege of Gaza, stops the illegal settlement, and the Israeli government returns Palestinian land, and then pays out all the funding to Israel as it has a vibrant economy and it can pay its own way anyway. U.S. war issues. Number 1, reduce the U.S. military budgets, which is the largest in the world and is the size of all of the rest of the military budgets of the world. Reduce that thing by 25% next year. Representative Kucinich, please. And 25% the following year. And use that money for schools, for the U.S. Congress should refuse to authorize funding for any military operations unless the draft is installed. And that way it will determine whether or not the American public is willing to place their daughters and sons into war and are willing to sacrifice education, health, roads, and other aspects of life in exchange for a war budget. No, and also, we need to conduct a referendum among 18 and 25-year-old Americans before any war is declared to determine if they are willing to go into an equitable draft for military service to fight in these wars and sacrifice their lives, and then pay for, over the next decades, the expenses of education and health and road that will be used up by this war budget. And if that age group refuses to go to the proposed war, then the draft moves on to the next age group of the politicians who are proposing the war. And then finally, I think the Congress should refuse to authorize any expansion of our U.S. military forces. We've got way too many as it is right now. And if we've got them, there is a prevalent feeling in Washington that we ought to use them. So with that, I want to thank you all and thank Congressman for hosting.